If you believe that Russia should be able to invade Ukraine and take territory without recourse, then I mean that's pro-imperialism. That's not, and that's still pro-war.
No,
yes, it is.
A lot of people around the world do a lot of bad things. I don't think the U.S. should be an empire going and funding wars all over the world.
We're not funding wars. We're funding the defense. I mean, like, and there's something that you can be said where should we draw a certain line? I have already conceded that strings should be attached and we should be involved in peace negotiations. But to flatten the power dynamics here, I mean, I would imagine this is like the same argument that you hear when it comes to Israel and Palestine, right? Where Palestinians are defending themselves, and then it's, oh my gosh, they are just it's completely symmetrical. Israel and Palestine. These are two actors just battling it out.
So you're in favor of intervention there?
I would love to fund the Palestinians so that they were able to have a better
life. You are
life
to the right
themselves.
Of me on foreign policy.
Well, we already fund Israel, dude.
Yeah.
Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I don't have an answer to.
Then you're in favor of funding military. We fund the Iron Dome.
Literally saying,
we fund their military-industrial complex.
Anything enough about it?
Then if it's your principle and you're anti-war, then you should be saying then we should cut Israel funding for Israeli defense simply, right now.
I lean. That's why I said 99%. I'll say I absolutely lean against providing military aid to Israel. I just don't know. I will say a new war in Ukraine, in a territory that we are not, the United States is not, doesn't mean that I'm as far left as possible on the question of imperialism. It means that you are to the right of me on that issue.
Yeah.
Like your position would provide funding for massive multinational military industrial complex corporations.
I mean, I think that's the fact that we do have those contracts is messed up. I think the United States, I think the United States should be more primarily. You want to nationalize the defense industry? You want to go for that? I'm down.
I don't know about nationalizing that. That empowers it, makes it permanent.
Well, there's always going to be a weapons industry, and there's always going to be. It should be severely cut into. But the United States, by the way, made a promise in 1993 to Ukraine that we would defend them if they denuclearize.
That's true.
So that is part of what we're doing in this instance.
That's true too, and I think that's an interesting question about upholding our obligations that I don't disagree with. It would be very difficult for us. Granted, the issue is I think I'm like a little kid. I'm like 7 years old when something like that happens, and now in my name, we engage in this conflict and war. I think it's fair to say that while I can understand that treaty exists, as a now adult who is paying tax into this, I have the right to object to past agreements that weren't made by me. That being said, I just, my point on this one was specifically, I see all these Ukrainian flags and profiles. I make a comment in agreement with Hassan where I was like, he was right about Mr. Beast. And then I was talking about military intervention and how it's wrong. We're spending $100 billion on this war in Ukraine. We shouldn't be doing it. And then he laughed at me over it. And I'm just like, genuine question. When did it become, or maybe I was always wrong, when I was at like Occupy or doing these like anti-Iraq war protests back in the 2000s, I thought that it was the left position to oppose military expansion, military industrial complex. But today it's inverted. Strangely, it's the Trump supporters saying no war.
No, because they're in favor of Russian imperialism. That is, you're again flattening power dynamics of who was the invader and who has been invaded.
That's not what I'm talking about.
I'm in favor of the United States abiding by the treaty that we promised Ukraine in 1993.
I'm not talking about any of that.
We said that we were going to defend them if they do denuclearize. Right. And by the way, why I'm more pro-war than you, or anti-war, anti-war than you, is that I'm in favor of broad denuclearization. And I think that we should continue to make our promises to countries that choose not to engage in making nuclear power.
How does that make you more than me?
In nuclear weaponry.
I don't disagree on that at all.
Okay, then there you go. But I'm in favor of committing and making our and because they denuclearized and said that we're not going to create nuclear weaponry, I am in favor of keeping our promise on that front so that we are able to incentivize and keep our promises that we are going to back you up if you choose not to make nuclear weaponry.
Maybe it's not a left or right thing. Maybe it's more of just like a libertarian thing.
I mean,
libertarian versus authoritarian.
I think it's that first of all, anti-war is a dumb like position. I'm sorry. It's everybody's like anti-wars they don't like, but obviously like I can composite a scenario where you would support like an intervention. Like if you gave me time to like think about
99%,
right?
Because nothing's absolute. Like if you were to tell me that Vladimir Putin he's live streaming himself about to launch a nuclear weapon at Washington, D.C., I'd be like, okay, we got to do something about that.
But there's something to what she's saying, where the Ukraine, after the fall of the Soviet Union, had the third largest nuclear weapons stockpile.
That's right.
And in exchange for giving it up, there were security guarantees. Now, if you're worried about nuclear proliferation in other countries that might lead to a nuclear war, protecting or making sure that they can maintain their territorial integrity, just as an example to other countries that might want to denuclearize in the future, is a worthwhile stake. And I think I understand that position. Like, it makes perfect sense in my opinion.
I understand it. I don't care though, right? So it's kind of like if some dude cut a deal with, like, someone in my family cut a deal with someone else, and then 30 years later they walk up and say, you know, your dad told me that if I ever had this problem, you were going to take care of me. I'd be like, I'm not my dad. I'm sorry. Like, governments change, policies change. And the idea that because 30 years ago, someone cut you a promise means that I now have to spend $200 billion defending you. The people of this generation who are inheriting this country did not agree to that. No, it's fine.
So what does that say to people who might be manufacturing their own nuclear weaponry? That it doesn't, that the promises made by the world superpower don't really matter. And I
don't like the idea of America
necessarily
being this, like, world superpower.
I
Like,
agree.
my views is probably different from you in that regard. I'm more so like, I think it'd be great if we brought jobs back here, if we protected the middle class, maybe had stronger workers' rights.
100%. You want to talk unions? I'm in favor of that.
Tariffs on imports for two reasons. The idea that we'd manufacture a car in China and then ship it on a boat over here just to waste energy because someone's willing to do it cheaper is nonsensical to me. Just buy American. So we need to build up the incentives for all the manufacturing to happen here in the United States.
Just want to briefly note that it is pretty telling that when Tim used the phrase workers' rights, and I seriously doubt that he actually wants to even beef up labor laws. I think he's really just using that in a confused way to talk about protectionism. That would be my best guess here. I'm not sure. But when Emma said, hey, you want to talk about unions? He did not take that invite. And I'm pretty sure after my own debate with him last summer in New York, I know why, because he was super duper anti-union in that debate. But if he talks about that position now, I think that would really undermine the way that he's trying to frame himself in his positions.
Create good jobs to protect the workers. Worry less about whether or not we're going to go blow up some foreign country, a bunch of kids in it or something like that.
But I think like there's like like you're not seeing this past like what's currently happening now, because I get it, right? And I was a big Ron Paul guy, and he didn't like the idea that one generation could promise the sons of a future generation.
Right. That's exactly
right.
I
understand that position, but if we don't want Saudi Arabia to nuclearize, we don't want Iran to nuclearize, and we're like, hey, like, you know, like, we got you, like, don't nuclearize. We're going to try to, like, you know, be the 800-pound gorilla in the room so that you don't have problems. And then they look and say, well, you made that promise to Ukraine. And then 30 years later, they're invaded by Russia and completely
Why are we making those promises?
Because that's the nature of a treaty.
No, you know, the idea that
how could any treaty exist, Tim, if it's people had your position and just said, yeah, fuck it.
People,
so that's anti-diplomacy, and that's pro-war.
Oh, come on.
Me
literally being like, we shouldn't go to war. Like, that's pro-war.
Well, being
the idea that
is
we can make a treaty around, here's why we won't attack you. Totally fine. Here's a treaty around, I'm going to allow your citizens to cross my border with no visa, and we'll reciprocate, like, back and forth. And then having one being like, in 30 years, if anyone comes to fight you, we will fight on your behalf, despite the fact that you're not an allied nation or a bunch of other issues. I don't think at any point ever the U.S. should have been making these promises. And then to come out and be like, but now Saudi Arabia is, I'm sure every country is going to be upset if we don't fight on the behalf of some other country.
No, it's not. It's not about.
There are limitations. Look, nothing's absolute. I get it. We're in this position now. There's an interesting question of South Korea. People ask me, what if China invaded? And I'm like, well, we got a lot of troops there right now. So I understand the circumstances of today. But the issue is, you know, for one, we could have put a no-fly zone over Ukraine before the invasion started. That would have stopped Russia in its tracks.
Well, a no-fly zone is a de facto declaration of war once the plane gets shot down, once the United States...
And that means Russia would have to have shot down, would have had to attack us.
I mean,
You remember how earlier I described my own experience of Tim Pool being a piece of shit and said I was nevertheless shocked that he accused Emma of being a pedophile for not wanting to pull genderqueer off of library bookshelves. What that was to Tim's morality, this is to Tim's intellect. I I feel like literally in the last 30 seconds of watching this part of the debate, I realized that Tim Pool is much dumber than I thought he was. Because he says, oh, Jesus Christ, this is amazing, right? Especially coming right after this whole segment where, honestly, you know, this whole Ukraine thing, I think her position's okay. Like, honestly, grading on a curve of some of the sort of soft left positions on Ukraine that are out there, I think the one she's defending is, you know, I'm not going to get too mad at that. But, you know, that's like probably the place I agree with her the least, because I think that, you know, I think I'm like much more concerned about, you know, escalating U.S. intervention. Although, again, I do want to be fair. She said strings attached and pro-peace negotiations. And I do think probably, you know, like American diplomacy might have been able to stop this before the war started. But what Tim just said is just, after 20 minutes of saying that he's more anti-war than thou, what he just said was the U.S. could have stopped the invasion in the first place if we'd put a no-fly zone over Ukraine. I think in Tim's whatever kind of brain is going on under the beanie, he thinks that a no-fly zone is like a force field that like you can, you know, that like you, I don't know, maybe, you know, maybe in there's some like NATO base in Poland somewhere where somebody presses the button and, you know, the force field goes up over Ukraine. No fly zone is just a way of saying that when Russian planes flew over Ukraine, the United States would shoot it down. Like saying that we're going to put up a no-fly zone is just a way of saying that the United States is going to shoot down Russian planes. So this entire discussion for the last 20 minutes has been Tim saying he's so anti-war that he's totally against like the United States fighting any kind of proxy war in Ukraine by providing this level of aid and whatever, you know, I'm sympathetic to a point, whatever. What he's advocating is literally World War III. What he's saying should have happened is that the United States, now he doesn't even like that 1993 commitment to defend Ukraine if Russia invaded. You know, he doesn't even like saying we should supply arms to Ukraine in order to honor that commitment. But what he wants, what adult Tim, not 7-year-old Tim in 1993 who had no choice in the matter, what adult Tim wants the United States to have done is commit that if Russia invaded Ukraine, the United States would directly go to war with Russia. That's what a no-fly zone means, right? I mean, when he's saying, oh, Russia would have had to attack U.S. planes, no, it wouldn't have. What the fuck are you talking about, man? Like, unless you literally believe that there are U.S. planes that are, you know, sending up like the force field, like that's what no-fly zone means to you. A no-fly zone just means an American commitment to shoot to the United States itself directly shooting down Russian planes. So after this whole 20 minutes of, oh, I guess you're not so, you know, I'm very anti-war. You don't sound so anti-war to me. I'm a much more anti-war person than you are. What he has committed himself to is the United States should have gone to war with Russia, or at least should have threatened to go to war with Russia directly itself. Not like a proxy war, not through Ukraine, not arming Ukraine, but that the United States should have committed itself to directly going to war with Russia if Russia invaded Ukraine. That's what Mr. I'm 99% anti-war is advocating. His 99% anti-war includes a 1% that includes funding Israeli soldiers enforcing an apartheid regime in the West Bank, or at least maybe. And it also includes literally World War III. Just
either way, that the no-fly zone and us getting more directly involved in that way would be catastrophic potentially war between two nuclear powers.
If agreed, fair point.
You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.